Senior living operators face a complex set of challenges. How do you stay ahead of the pack? Listen in to From Leads to Leases, a CCR growth podcast for expert solutions that transform problems into opportunities. And maybe someday soon you'll partner with us to generate $1.5 million and up in additional revenue per community in just 12 months. Welcome back to From Leads to Leases, the podcast where we unravel the complexities of senior living marketing and sales to bring you actionable insights and strategies. I'm your host, Jerry Vinci, CEO of CCR Growth, and I'm here to help you connect your communities with the families and residents they serve in the most effective ways possible. So in today's episode, we're diving into part 2 of our series on paid search, focusing on understanding your audience. We're shifting gears from the technical aspects we discussed in part 1 to explore how prospective residents and their families search for senior living communities. Joining me again is Jen Davis, our in-house Google Ads and Bing Ads specialist at CCR Growth with over 25 years in search marketing. Jen has a wealth of knowledge in tailoring advertising campaigns that meet the unique needs of the senior living market. So today we'll be talking about how to get into the minds of your prospects and their families, the importance of search terms, how to effectively target your ads locally, and why understanding the full journey from search to move-in is crucial. This episode's packed with insights that will help you better connect with your target audience and optimize your paid search strategies to drive quality leads. So whether you're a senior living marketing director looking to refine your PPC approach, or a sales professional eager to understand how search behavior can impact your lead generation, you're in the right place. So let's get started. Welcome back, Jen, and thanks again for joining me on the show.
Yeah, I'm excited for part 2.
Me too. So just to jump right into it, I think the first thing we really want to talk about is search intent and kind of understanding search behavior in general. Can you explain the concept of search intent and why it's crucial for senior living providers to understand it?
Yeah, usually when people search, sometimes they're just asking a question like, what is senior living or what is a nursing home, for instance? And those are people that, for various reasons, it could be a high school student that is researching where to volunteer, for instance, or writing a paper and they need information, versus those that are actually looking for senior living where they might use a keyword like find senior living near me. And that is showing that their intent is to actually look and potentially move into a senior living facility. So understanding the difference. That's not to say that people who are still in the research phase, what is a nursing home, for instance, or trying to think of another one. Sometimes it could be cost related even, aren't good, but I would definitely start with those that are using the intent words like find or senior living move-in special, for instance, or immediate move-in. Those types of things is where you really want to start to see how your users are, how they're responding to that. What's the lead volume you can get? What's the move-in rate you get for those keywords before you go to what I would call more top of the funnel. Those that are still researching, what is this thing that I might be moving into? And then also knowing that some of those people are researching it for different reasons.
Yeah. So what are some of the common search phrases or keywords that indicate a strong intent to find a senior living community?
Yeah, so definitely the word find, sometimes cost related as well, near me or in my area, or even a particular city location, for instance, is usually an indication that they're looking for something location wise, or that they have something in mind. And that could be somebody sitting in Ohio that decides they want to be in California. So, they're going to have to search something like senior living in San Diego in order to see San Diego options. Because if they just type in senior living while they're sitting in Ohio, they're most likely going to see Ohio options. They'll see others, but they may not see San Diego, for instance. So any location, any find, move-in special, immediate move-in. Other things like even I've seen a lot of searches for new senior living facilities, for instance. So somebody looking for like the latest and greatest. Not as strong as an intent as in my area or near me, for instance, but I still see that as a pretty strong intent keyword. So it's usually some type of word like find or near me in conjunction with like senior living, retirement community, nursing home, personal care facility, for instance. So it's a combination of kind of those how they describe the property and then those words of find and near me in conjunction with those that show the strongest intent.
I think I find it interesting that people are still using the near me a lot because Google has kind of contextually positioned their search results now where if it's a service that is a locally based service, they typically will show you local results without you having to type that in. And I guess most people don't know that. So they're still probably putting in cities and still probably putting in near me, right, in the search, and not just assuming Google knows that they're looking for a local search.
Yeah, I forget. I feel like it was about 7 or 8 years ago where near me like exploded as
Yeah.
far as
Yeah.
including being included in the phrase. And yes, I do think that Google has caught on for the most part. But yes, we still see it pretty. I mean, it usually is one of our top keywords for both impressions and clicks as well as leads. Something that has near me or in my area still.
Hmm. I remember on the SEO side when near me first came out, it was like everybody was asking, how do we get the term near me into our SEO strategy? It's like you can't really, how do you put that into the title of a blog post? It's a little challenging. But I think from the ad side of things, you're doing a phrase match. So if somebody's specifically looking for, senior living in Austin, Texas, or senior living, near me, and they live in Austin, Texas, that's easy enough to do. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yes.
How do family dynamics influence the search and decision making process for senior living?
Yeah, I definitely think that, well, a couple things. One, we know that adult children searching may or may not be in the same area as the parent. They may be
Yeah.
searching for a property near the parent, or they might actually be searching for a property near them. I know in your instance, your parents live out on the East Coast, but you're out on the West Coast. So, when that decision comes, the question is, do your parents want to stay on the East Coast? Is that going to be good for you as the adult child, or do you need them closer to you in California for various reasons, just to check in on them? Not that the senior living facility won't do a good job, but obviously just checking in and making sure they have everything they need.
Hmm.
So there's that component. We've got a location issue, if you will, because we target around, I mean, we know a lot of the move-ins are from people within the area, for instance. So there's that. So adult children are going to search differently. They're going to search, potentially senior living in whatever town the adult is in. They may still do the search near me or the town that they live in. They might do somewhere in between. So definitely have to take that into consideration. But the other thing is that usually adult children don't necessarily know the level of care that their parents need. Not that they don't have an idea, but they may be thinking that it's more independent living, for instance, when their parents are at a level that the property would say, no, they need assisted living. So trying to understand that too, that they might go down one route of retirement community or something like that, thinking they can just get their parents into an area that is going to be where they're going to be monitored and stuff, but they might need that assisted living level where they get a little bit more care and things. And then potentially they might also look for a facility that they can kind of migrate through from, an independent living to assisted living to, more end of life stage, for instance. So all of that's got to be taken into consideration. That ultimately is a little bit different than how the senior may search.
Yeah. Curious how many communities are missing out on potential prospects because they're so focused on that immediate radius around the community. I know it's a very high percentage. Most of the communities I talk to, they say roughly around 90% of their move-ins happen within like a 10 to 15-mile radius of the community. So it would make sense for them to kind of focus most of their strategy around that. But I think there's also, like you said, a lot of the adult children that are searching who may not live in the area and are responsible for helping to find a place to call home for their loved ones. So I don't know. I feel like that could be a lost opportunity.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I agree that we're kind of staying within a maybe 50-mile radius. It obviously depends on the community,
Hmm.
and we want to take a look at their demographic. But that doesn't mean that the person that moved in actually is the one that searched, right? It could be the child that's in a completely different state. So we do make sure that we keep location options open so that it's not just people who are in the area, but people who are showing an intent for that area. So again, somebody sitting in Ohio looking for senior living in San Diego, our ad will show to the person in Ohio, even though we're only targeting 50 miles around San Diego, because they're showing that intent of the city, for instance.
Yeah, no, that's great. What are some ways we can address the concerns and preferences of both older adults and their families when it comes to search-based marketing?
Yeah, I think one of the things is for seniors, when they're looking, they may be looking more at amenities, for instance, or a floor plan, or, what are they getting? What's the cost? Where the adult children, the caretaker may be looking for, what is the staff like? Or, what type of, for assisted living, like how much assisted living do you get, for instance? They're not maybe as concerned as, is there hair salon or a pool on the property? So, but the senior does. I mean, that's where they're going to live. They
Yeah.
want to make sure they're getting what they can out of it. And I can't say it's the same thing when we buy a house or we look for a new apartment or something like that. We also want to know what the amenities are as well. So I think that's where we have to kind of, the responsive ads in Google, because we can give up to 15 headlines. And that way, when somebody's searching and they're showing a little bit more intent of, what's the staff like, or the assisted living, like level of care, for instance, those headlines that are kind of answering those questions can be shown to that user versus one who's looking for the amenities, a pool, a hair salon, or whatever. So if they're searching, senior living with a pool, we can have a headline that says that, and that's going to encourage that person to click, for instance, versus showing them something that their family might be searching for, which is more like what's the level of nurses, for instance, are there RNs on staff, doctors on staff, those types of things.
Yeah, and I know we talked about some of that in the technical episode in part one, basically having the dynamic ads that kind of can show the different headlines and things like that. So is that how you would kind of tailor that content based on search intent?
Yeah, so search intent, and obviously we've got keywords that are kind of associated with that as well. They're a little bit lower volume than, just like senior living near me, for instance. But those are ones that have already gone past I would say, the research phase and know exactly what they're looking for. We have a senior that is not going to move into a facility unless there's a pool, for instance. And we have a child that's not going to, suggest a place to their parent unless it has, an RN level on every floor, whatever that might be, whatever they feel that is going to be most comfortable for them, for their parents to move into that place. So it's a combination of keywords and then the ad copy to kind of pull them in to make sure that in some ways it's even to deter click, because if the senior living facility doesn't have a pool and the senior is set on it, then maybe we don't waste our money there and we go after ones who are more interested in the library or the hair salon or whatever that amenity is. So it's kind of a combination of pull those in that we can because we have what they're looking for, or potentially deter those that we don't have what they're looking for, so we don't incur that click.
Yeah, there's definitely gonna be those non-negotiables. Like if somebody wants to have their pet with them and it's a non-pet facility, there's just no way that would even fly. So I think like that's talking about search intent and tailoring content in the ads. What about for the website? I mean, because the website content should also kind of mirror what they're seeing in the ads, so there isn't that disconnect, right?
Yeah, so we always want to make sure our messaging in the ads is not saying something that is either one, incorrect. That's regardless of senior living, we shouldn't have that. But it's highlighting the areas that the content is. So to your point, pet friendly, that's a pretty big deal. And so making
Mm-hmm.
sure that we have that in both the ad, but the page that we're taking to them initially on the ad should talk about pets, should have a picture of pets in the seniors, for instance, whether that's in an apartment or the lobby area or whatever that can be, so that we're making that ultimate connection for the user, both ad copy and landing page. We always want that messaging to be the same. So even taglines, parts of mission or vision or values, for instance, is something that we may include in headlines and descriptions. So then when we get to the page, they already have a feeling of the property and they're not, trying to fish around for, well, what is this property? What does it have? We want to make sure we've gotten as much as we can. Obviously, we have limited characters within the ad copy, but give them a feel for it. So then when we get to the landing page, it is just an expansion of what they already believe about this property.
Yeah, I think that's really important too, because you see a lot of ad campaigns where when you click on the ad, it doesn't even take them to a specific page on the website. It literally just dumps them onto the homepage. And then I think that's a big disconnect because number one, you're creating more work for the visitor to now have to find and dig for that information. But two, it's like that branding disconnect of like, here was what I saw in the ad. This is what I want to know more about. And you're not going to drive me directly to that content. You're most likely going to lose them. But I think most people don't do a very good job of like having call to actions in all the pages of their website. So, you know, somebody might get to that page, but then there's no way for them to reach out or contact or learn more, so they kind of get stuck in website purgatory. and then and then where do they go from there? So I think people definitely need to think about that when they're creating their ad campaign and then the corresponding pages that they link to in that campaign for sure. What are some examples of effective content strategies that align with different types of search intent?
Yeah, I think a great example of this is if we're going after keywords that are what I'll say cost based, senior living or senior living cost per month, for instance, as a search term. So that tells me somebody who is a little bit cost conscious, or
Yeah.
they just have no idea what this costs. This might be their first search, and trying to figure out what the different cost structures are, because we know there's a lot, and each property is different and what they offer and things like that. So I think a good thing is, I know we've used this a couple times, taking them to a page that's a calculator that kind of walks them through the cost of senior living facility versus having a home, for instance, because then they're taking in, mortgage, if that's still being paid, property taxes, electricity, food, gas, all of those things, because that's not something that somebody thinks of necessarily. They're thinking, okay, I pay $1,200 in a mortgage, but senior living wants me to pay $2,000. Well, I can't afford that, but they're not taking into consideration all that's included with that 2000, for instance.
Hmm.
So something like that, where we're answering the question that they're looking for instance. And I think that's super effective. We've used a calculator. I think we've even taken them to like a blog post as well. We just make sure that those pages have call to actions once they're interacting with it, so that we're not just giving them, well, here's the cost to think about. It's like, well, here's the cost, but why don't you contact us, because we can walk you through this, we can talk to you about it, we can show you the amenities and our staff as well.
Yeah, that's great. I think cost is a big one for people because they're really not thinking about all those little incidentals that add up from groceries to even like some people have HOA fees, right? When you see all of those stacked up against this one price point that includes everything, meals, entertainment, lodging, that's it's pretty hard to argue that it's not worth it at that point. The level of care obviously comes into play because if they're assisted living or memory care, there's going to be a much higher costs per month than there is if it's say independent living.
Right.
Um, yeah. So moving on to long tail keywords. So this is something that I think is super important for people to understand the concept of. So maybe you can talk us through what are long tail keywords and why are they particularly effective for senior living marketing?
Yeah, long tail keywords are probably going to be keywords that are probably more, 4 to 5 keywords in a phrase, for
Hmm.
instance, and are going to include somewhat very specific things. Like, again, senior living facility with a pool, for instance, would be a long tail keyword. Um, and what's effective about it is, one, again, you can kind of deter the click, as in, if you don't have a pool, you're not going to bid on that keyword. But if you do, you've got a pretty quality potential lead there as well. So that is why it's effective. The other thing is, they're cheaper, because not every facility is going to go after all of those. There's, senior living, nursing home, those are all the big keywords. Those are going to have tons of volume, but they're also going to have tons of, potentially
They're
people who
so
are not going to
broad.
be,
Yeah.
yeah, they're not going to be persuaded to fill out a form on your facility for whatever reason. And we don't know, because they are so broad, and we don't have an understanding of what it was that they were looking for, that the community is not offering, for instance. But as we go into the longer tail keywords, less competition, usually less cost, usually higher quality leads.
Are there any in particular that you can think of that have really panned out and or I guess are more consistent showing up across the searches than others?
Yeah, I would take. the words senior living and nursing home, and anything appended to those outside of in my area or near me that we talked about in regards to like search intent, for instance. But some of them are going to be cost based, where they're senior living below 3,000 a month, for instance. Usually it's a nice round number, is what I have found. Depends on the area too. When you're doing New York, it's going to be more like under 4,000. But when you're doing Indiana, it's under 2 or 3,000. So some of them are cost based, some of them are going to be amenity related. The other ones too is condition based for assisted living or memory care, more so for memory care, because there's different versions of dementia. So once the diagnosis comes in, a lot of people will search that particular dementia and then look for assisted living with that that form of dementia, for instance. Those are probably the top ones that are not searched super often, but when they are, low cost and have a high conversion rate to leads. And I think those are better quality leads in those instances.
So when it would come to integrating long tail keywords into the actual content of the page, I mean, that would be a difficult process, I would think, for some of those keywords, because your page would just be full of these random phrases, right? So like, is Google just contextually making guesses on what, what's being offered or what this person's looking for based on the search term, and then kind of showing the ad I mean, because I know it's not just looking at the ad, it's also looking at the website or the link that's being linked in the ad to say, hey, does this page reflect what's being shown in the ad? And then it's going to give you either a positive score on your ad or a negative score on your ad. So I would think that the pages that reflect the ad copy are going to rank higher. So how does somebody go about optimizing the actual web page? This is like the long way about asking this question, but how does somebody go about optimizing a landing page or a web page for a long tail keyword if it's maybe not necessarily in the text itself in that specific phrase? Does that make
Yeah, I
sense?
think it does. And I think the best way, and I would say not only for Google Ads, but in some ways for just as we know, people don't always read, and they don't read chunks of text on a website. So
Yeah.
bulleted lists are awesome. So think about this. If it's, again, somebody looking for a certain amenity, then on the landing page, we could have a bulleted list of those big amenities: pool, hair salon, library, pet friendly, those types of things. Same with if it's memory care and the certain variations of dementia, for instance. It's, we can handle these conditions, and they list them in a bulleted list, for instance. The other thing is, in certain instances, Google uses synonyms. So it understands that if it's only dementia on the landing page without a specific dementia condition, it still understands that dementia A and dementia B still means dementia, for instance. So
Yeah.
if we don't want to cover everything, we just need to use the grand word, if you will, in those cases.
Okay, that makes sense. So basically, Google would be taking there'd be like a hierarchy on the page where okay, this page is about, this is an independent living community. So if somebody searched independent living community with a pool, and they had on that page, they had, as one of their amenities, a pool, then Google can say, yes, this is an independent living community, and yes, they have a pool. So then that long tail keyword can then be used to find that ad and that web page. Okay. So that makes
Yes,
sense.
and
Yeah.
to that point, we get a better score, quality score, as Google
Mm-hmm.
calls it, which also means that we can be above our competitors and still pay less than them per click if we have the better quality score. So there's a lot going on there, but having that right mix ultimately lowers your cost, but shows you higher in the search results, and then gives you the chance for that higher quality lead.
Okay. So talking about local paid search, not just paid search, how important is local targeting in paid search for senior living communities, and why is that so critical?
Yeah, so there's a couple things to talk about here with local paid search. There's obviously, as we talked about, in my area, near me, for
Mm,
instance. And that's all based on the targeting that we're doing. So if we say we want to go 50 miles out from the community, anybody within that 50-mile radius that is searching near me or in my area is most likely going to see an ad, for instance. We also talked about the Ohio person searching for San Diego, showing that intent. So we make sure that our location targeting is set to showing that intent and not just people within the area. But the other thing is that while 50 miles for most communities might be adequate based on their data of who's moving in, sometimes it's 10 miles that is like the super important. So we actually do a couple different radiuses. We'll do 10, 25, 35, and 50. Now that may vary for community. We might, do a little bit different. Like it might be 5 miles for a very populous area as the first radius, if you will. And we can bid a little bit differently for each one of those radiuses. So if 5 or 10 miles, if 75% of their members are coming from 5 to 10 miles, we can up that bid by 50% in comparison to the 50-mile radius. But we still want to do the 50-mile radius because, again, we might have adult children that are in the area that are a little bit further out. But also, I still believe that 50 miles for someone to move in is applicable to most communities. But we don't have to bid as high as the 5 to 10, for instance. The other part of it is being shown on Google Maps as
just going to ask you
advertising
about
as well.
that. Yeah.
Yes. So that is, that's the other thing. So that's why we'll actually go after, in addition to things like senior living near me, it'll be senior living San Diego. Or I know in some instances, some cities might have neighborhoods, like I'm in Chicago. So we have a neighborhood called Little Village. So senior living in Little Village, for instance, and Google will understand that. And that way, as we get down into the city level, we can actually show on the map as well for advertising, both for their Google My Business profile, as well as an ad in addition to that.
Yeah, that's just extra brand visibility. I mean, I know the map pack on the Google search results gets the most amount of visibility when somebody's doing a local search. So I've seen some of our ads. It's been pretty fun. I've seen the ad show up at the top of the page. Then in the map pack, we also see an ad for one of our communities, and then we have our organic listing that's also showing on page one. So our clients are potentially getting three points of visibility on the first page of Google, which is pretty exciting. And that seems to be like the winning combination. With the local map pack, is that a separate type of campaign, or is that just a feature that Google offers?
It used to be part of the search campaigns, and still is a little bit, because we do have what is the location extension. However, I have found that the new Performance Max campaigns tend to do better with that. Like, I think they just show more because I think it's an opportunity, since we have search ads running and that takes up so much of the budget. Performance Max gets to show a little bit more, for instance, on map. Not that our search can't, but I think because we're so covered off on search and have that budget, it's Performance Max, which kind of brings about a little bit more awareness to all the campaigns. And we see that lift in all campaigns. It does a little bit better with the map.
Okay. We just talked about the location extension. So basically that would be like your ad not just showing your community name, but it would also show the location in the ad. I know there's a whole bunch of other extensions and types of enhancements that you can include in your ads to make them stand out. So what are some of those and like that you've seen to be most effective?
Yeah, besides location extensions, obviously call extensions, because so many people just want to make the phone call. For instance, so, think about this. You've got a senior that has just been to the doctor and they're driving back home, or their child is driving them back home. They've got some news that maybe they should start thinking about assisted living, for instance, and they drive past your facility. They may just Google the name and want to get a phone call and start talking to someone about what they need to do, for instance. So something like a call extension where they can just hit the button to call directly is super important. The other important part about that is tracking it, making sure that you're understanding
Don't talk about
how many.
tracking.
Right, exactly. About who's calling, and do they actually turn into move-ins, for instance. So those are probably the two. If you do not have, you are making a huge mistake, is what I would say. Other things like images, business logo, or business name, call outs, and structured snippets. Those are all they're not necessarily must-haves, but in my mind, the more room you can take in the advertising space, the better. Oh, and I forgot to mention site links too.
Mm-hmm.
So I fill out all of those. Now, do they show every time? No. Do some of them just not show? Absolutely. But I don't want to have it blank because most likely my competitor is using all of them. So if I have the opportunity to, I want to do that. Things like business logo, business name, and images, they do take some history to the account. Well, business logo and business name, you have to be a verified advertiser in order to use those extensions. So that's something that should be done. Images, usually you can't add images, which will show just next to the search ads until I believe 30 days after your account's been running. I'm not really sure why Google kind of holds that back. But definitely when you can, I would add those. We just want, it's kind of like the wild out there. You want to be the biggest. Like, if you're under a bear attack, you're supposed to act really big to kind of scare them off.
Yeah.
Well, we want to scare off, right? We want to scare off the other competitors and only show us, for instance, and be that
Yeah.
800-pound gorilla right there in their face. And then the other thing is you can use that to your advantage, especially with local targeting. You can include the city name and a site link. Your structured snippets, for instance, can include your amenities. Your call outs can talk about, your excellent staff, get very specific about it. So they have a lot of information about you before they even click.
Ultimately, Google gets to decide what it shows and what it doesn't show from all of the information that you've put out there. It's going to optimize that for the best experience for the user. And I think that's something that our audience needs to kind of understand. There's this misperception out there about Google and the search results that they're showing. It's like Google is the librarian of the internet. And even when it comes to ads, they want to present the best option possible based on the search criteria you've given them. So if you've given them a long tail keyword like independent living with a pool in Phoenix, Arizona, they're going to be as specific as possible with the search results as well. So I think it's important to know that, like, even though you're paying for placement with an ad, Google is still doing its best to contextually match your ad given the search phrase that's being used.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's in their mission statement for Google Ads is to provide quality search results. And that is both advertising wise and organic.
Yeah. So it behooves you, like you said, to fill out all that information. Otherwise, like you're putting yourself at a loss, and most likely your competitors are doing all of that. The senior living industry is highly competitive when it comes to advertising. So we know that, there's going to be anywhere from 5 to 10 top competitors in most markets that we operate in. So we really have to put our best foot forward, regardless of the size of the community. So I want to talk about mobile search behavior because this is something that's shifted significantly in the last decade. So back around 2015 or 2016, Google split the search index. So the mobile search experience would be more unique and optimized for mobile devices versus people doing a desktop search. So if I do the same search on desktop or mobile, I might see different results. And now if we fast forward to today, across the entire web, more than 60% of website traffic is also mobile based. And what's funny about that is I actually, before this interview, I was thinking about that. I'm like, well, that's probably not true for senior living because they tend to be, they're not early adopters. They're not super tech savvy users. So there probably would be a greater number of desktop search users over the age of 65 than mobile search users. However, I looked at our own client data. I found that roughly 70% of all traffic coming from adults over the age of 65 was coming from either mobile devices or tablets. About 12% from tablets and the other 58% from smartphones. So I think that's impressive. And when I look at total traffic from all age groups, the numbers were pretty similar, with 39% coming from desktop, 58% from mobile, and only about 3% from tablets. So it's safe to say that search behavior in terms of technology usage, it's kind of leveling out. And the argument that older adults are not heavy smartphone users can be put to bed. And that has got to be a key initiative for ad campaigns moving forward. So all that being said, how has the rise of mobile search impacted how people look for senior living options?
Yeah, and it goes back a little bit to that local search too, where near me back, again, 7 years was like an explosion. It was like 500% increase in searches with near me. With mobile, not as much. We've seen that actually decline, and I think because mobile does a better job in most instances of kind of locating where they're at, using the cell towers and things like that. So there's that component of it. But the other thing is, mobile, you only see maybe one ad, sometimes two. And
Yeah.
when you do see two, you are seeing usually one headline, one description. So you got to make every headline and every description be as honed in as you can, because it may only show one of the 15 headlines and one of the 4 descriptions, versus on desktop it can show 2 or 3 headlines or 2 descriptions, for instance. It may not also show a lot of those extensions. So we need to really make sure that we're kind of, mixing and matching. We've got intent for both the local user as well as the caretaker and the senior, so that it can decide the best option out of all of those to deliver. Because we need to make sure that we're showing our best foot forward, especially if it's the only ad that they're seeing.
Is there anything specific communities should be doing to ensure they're just as visible on mobile as they are on desktop searches? If that's the case, I know with ads being limited and you're not having as much real estate on the screen.
Yeah, so you can do mobile device bidding, but also with the new algorithms, the bidding algorithms like max conversions, and max conversions with like a cost per, for instance, it does that for you in some cases. You can do an increase or even a decrease on mobile depending on that community. I believe that it should be increased in most cases. I can't think of one that it shouldn't. But I would also say don't give up on desktop users, for instance. But I would kind of keep the bid probably as is and do the raise on mobile in those instances.
You were saying that mobile searches, they typically don't include phrases like near me and things like that. Is that based on the mobile search users' behavior, or is that just how Google's handling those types of searches?
I think Google's gotten better that it's using the cell data and where they're, kind of triangulating their location, that they do a much better job. When I'm sitting here on my computer at the office, I am about a mile away from 3 different suburbs. So I'm in one suburb, but I have one suburb a mile away one way. I have another suburb a mile away. So, and not that obviously a mile away, but I can get on my desktop results for things in those suburbs versus a suburb I live in, or even suburbs like 2 over. When I do it on my mobile, it's everything that is right here near me. It literally is within a mile or 2, for instance. So I think Google's done a better job of triangulating people in order to show them the best on mobile, or at least to start with, this is the nearest towards you, and then I'll move out from there.
I still remember when they split the index, everybody was freaking out. Like, what does this mean for search? But I think the user experience has proven that it's obviously much better now on mobile than it was in the past. And the fact that, we're seeing different results on mobile versus desktop, I think it's a good thing. It's optimizing the user experience. So as we wrap up our conversation, Jen, what would be the best piece of advice you could offer to senior living providers looking to create compelling local ad copy that resonates with prospects searching for senior living options in a specific area?
Yeah, it's a combination of making sure that in your ad copy, you're listing the city, or even better, sometimes more the major city, for instance, that you're near if your city is a little bit less populous, for instance, or actually doing both. I'm in a suburb of Chicago, but, I might put a headline that has Chicago in it as well as the actual suburb I live in. Because again, we need to look at a little bit beyond just the 5 to 10 mile radius, for instance. But we also need to make sure that that is in the landing page. So many times, the only thing that is talking about where the community is the address in the footer. And I think also just making sure pictures are adequate. Sometimes it's hard to know, but if I'm looking for something in Chicago and I see a senior living picture that is mountains, I'm in the flattest state in the union. Okay. I know that is not a senior living community in my area, for instance.
Yeah.
So just making that connection when people are actually looking for something, make sure you have it. So it should be in a headline. It should be in the first paragraph, for instance. reiterate where you're at, because they're looking for it. And if they have to go search an address at the bottom of your page, you've probably lost them.
All right. So there you have it, folks. I want to give a huge thanks to Jen for all her time and wisdom on paid search. You always bring so much value to every conversation. So thank you for that. And I really love and appreciate how you're not just thinking about the technical aspects of campaign management, which a lot of people do, but you're becoming a subject matter expert on consumer behavior for this industry. So I'm sure our listeners are going to agree and have so many takeaways to implement in their own campaigns based on what they've learned on today's episode and the previous part 1 of this series. So thank you again. So that wraps up our exploration of how to connect with your senior living prospects through paid search. I hope the insights shared by Jen Davis today have given you a clearer understanding of how to get into the minds of your audience and tailor your strategies accordingly. If you want to stay connected with Jen or learn more about how CCR Growth can help optimize your paid search efforts, be sure to visit our website at ccrgrowth.com or follow us on our social media channels. Remember, understanding your audience is key to driving successful marketing campaigns and converting those leads into move-ins. So I'm Jerry Vinci, CEO of CCR Growth, thanking you for joining us on From Leads to Leases, where we're giving you all these great senior living industry insights for free and asking nothing in return other than for you to like, subscribe, and share this episode with anyone who might find it useful. I'm truly grateful for your time and attention. Until next time, lead with strategy and with heart. Chat with you again soon. Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. Explore more at ccrgrowth.com. At CCR Growth, we've developed the Senior Growth Innovation Suite to unlock an additional $1.5 million and up in revenue per senior living community within a year. We specialize in generating quality leads, expediting sales, and reducing acquisition costs. Let's connect soon.